This is Evangelist Henry Walker. Thank you for tuning into our podcast, or maybe you're listening to me on my website at henrywalker.org under audio messages, or maybe you're listening to me on my YouTube channel. We want to continue a message from the last podcast about how false ministers need people who don't study the word for themselves. Let's go to Father in prayer first. Father, I thank you for another opportunity to minister to your people, Father. I ask you to use me just the way you want, Father. Let me say only what you want me to say, nothing more, nothing less. And Father, help people to open up their hearts to receive this word and study the word for themselves. And give you all the praise and the honor, Father, in the mighty name of Yeshua, by the blood of Yeshua. And Satan, I rebuke you from this podcast, every succeeding podcast, and anybody listening out there. Go and not return in the name of Yeshua, by the blood of Yeshua. Let's go to the book of Ezekiel chapter 3, please. Ezekiel chapter 3. Again, talking about how false ministers need people who don't study the word for themselves. Ezekiel chapter 3. Ezekiel is right after Jeremiah. Ezekiel chapter 3, verse 16. And it came to pass at the end of 7 days that the word of Yahweh came unto me, saying, Son of man, I have made you a watchman unto the house of Israel. Therefore hear the word at my mouth, and give them warning from me. When I say unto the wicked, Thou shalt surely die, and thou givest him not warning, nor speakest to warn the wicked from his wicked way, to save his life, the same wicked man shall die in his iniquity, but his blood will I require at your hand. How many ministers realize this? How many ministers just want to speak to what you want to hear and what they want you to hear, not what Yahweh says? Yet if thou warn the wicked, and he turn not from his wickedness, nor from his wicked way, he shall die in his iniquity, but you have delivered your soul. Again, when a righteous man doth turn from his righteousness and commit iniquity, and I lay a stumbling block before him, he shall die, because thou hast not given him warning. He shall die in his sin, and the righteousness which he had done shall not be remembered, but his blood will I require at your hand. It's important to stay close to Yahweh. Don't underestimate the flesh. The flesh is very strong. Turn our flesh over to the Spirit of the Father so he can mortify the deeds of our flesh and make us more like Yeshua and bring the fruit of the Spirit out of our life. That's Romans 8, verse 13. Verse 29, and Galatians 5, verse 22 to 26. In verse 21, Nevertheless, if thou warn the righteous man that the righteous sin not, and he doth not sin, he shall surely live, because he is warned, also thou hast delivered thy soul. It's such a responsibility to be a minister up there and instructing people and teaching people and preaching to people. They have to be saying what the Father wants the people to hear. But that's not happening very much. It's all about controlling people and keeping them in the ministry and not shaking them up. But we all need to be shaken up sometime. The Spirit of the Father wanted to shake us up if we're going the wrong way. The flesh is very strong. The only access that Satan has is to our flesh. Go to me Ezekiel 22. Ezekiel 22, verse 13. Behold, therefore, I have smitten my hand at thy dishonest gain, which thou hast made, and at thy blood, which thou hast been in the midst of the fire. Can your heart endure, or can your hands be strong in the days that I deal with you? I, Yahweh, have spoken it and will do it. So many ministers are up there misusing people and controlling people, and a lot of them are there just for financial reasons. And we talked on the last podcast from Malachi about bringing all your tithes into the storehouse, how ministers need to bring tithes and offerings into the storehouse to be able to distribute to other people, not to take 3 vacations in Hawaii every year or 2 brand new cars. I mean, a new car is important, vacation is important, but so many people are just fleecing the sheep. And will they be strong when the Father deals with them? I don't think so. Because the Father is watching. Some of these ministers think that they're going along, everything's just fine, nice and smooth, until the Father disrupts the whole thing. How many ministers have been brought down by one big mistake? In verse 23, And the word of Yahweh came unto me, saying, Son of man, say unto her, Thou art the land that is not cleansed, nor rained upon in the day of indignation. There is a conspiracy of her prophets in the midst thereof, like a roaring lion, ravening the prey. They have devoured souls. They have taken the treasure and precious things. They have made her many widows in the midst thereof. Her priests have violated my law and have profaned my holy things. They have put no difference between the holy and the profane. Neither have they showed difference between the unclean and the clean, and have hid their eyes from my Sabbaths, and I am profaned among them. There's so many ministries, so many assemblies, that the people that put the most offerings and tithes into the ministry can do almost anything they want. And they have the loudest voice in the ministry and how the ministry goes. And they make no difference between whether those people are clean or unclean, whether they're in sin or not. They just take their money and treat them like they're some kind of kings and queens. In verse 27, our princesses in the midst thereof are like wolves ravening to the prey, to shed blood and to destroy souls, to get dishonest gain. Again, it's that dishonest gain. You'd be surprised what happens after the service, meetings and so forth, when they're trying to raise money and things like that. You'd be very surprised. It's like a corporation trying to get money from people, and how can we do it and so forth. It's not every ministry, but there's a lot of ministries out there that are supposed to be non-for-profit, but they're for profit. And as I mentioned before, you're in some of those ministries. You may be in one of those ministries, and they're not profiting you. They're not profiting you at all. They're non-for-profit concerning you. In verse 28, and her prophets have daubed them with untempered mortar. Untempered means it's like a paste. It's not even like a concrete. It's untempered. It's just like a paste. You can't protect against anything. And some of these ministers are out there and they're not preaching the truth, and there's no protection around the assembly. The devil's just playing games in there. If that minister is not submitted to the Father, then the devil has free reign. And any covering that you think, any protection that you think you have under that minister is like untempered. It's just like paste. The devil can just walk right through. It's not concrete. It's not covered by the blood. You think you're protected, but the devil's right in there. He's in praise and worship. He's doing whatever he wants. He feels so comfortable in that ministry because the minister's not preaching the truth. They're still preaching the things of Constantine. 1,700 years his doctrine had been traditionalized into people. His form of Christianity. People are preaching that and standing on that, and the Spirit of the Father is not there because the Father backs up His Word with signs and wonders. It may be a large ministry, but the only way to get large is by compromising somewhere along the line. And that Constantine's form of Christianity, again, most people are following that tradition, and that road is going to lead to hell. It's not based on the Word. The feast days are called feast days of Yahweh, not the feast days of the Jews. It's for everybody. But Constantine wanted to put these holidays in there, Christmas and Easter and New Year and January 1st, to hide the Father's feast days. You have to be mature and study the Word for yourself. Go to my website at henrywalker.org. There's 2 free books on the bottom. One, it's called Noon. It's about the different hours in the day that the Father wants to move the most. There's 1 hour of the day when His healing anointing is greater than any of the hours contained in that book. And every feast day is explained there. And every month has special blessings. You can read it before the month begins and walk into those blessings. And remember, the day runs from 6 p.m. to 6 p.m. Evening and morning were the first day in the book of Genesis. It's so important you get on His schedule. It's not 12 or 1 a.m. Get that tradition out of your walk with Yeshua. And then the other book I have is the Trinity Really a Mystery. The Trinity is the Father manifesting Himself in 3 different ways, 3 aspects of the Father. As the Father, in the Son, as the Spirit that is making us more like Yeshua. It's His Spirit. There's only one Spirit, Ephesians 4:4. The Father is Spirit. There's only one Spirit. And He's making us just like Yeshua if we let Him, if we surrender to Him. That book could answer any questions you may have, but see, Constantine wanted to bring the 3-person doctrine in to be for Nimrod, Semiramis, and her son Tammuz. These 3 people, and brought it in. And he actually changed, the King James people changed some of those scriptures just to show that, but you have to be line upon line, precept upon precept. And they're easily explained. In my book, they're easily explained. There's only one throne. There's only one throne, Revelation 4:2. Yeshua is the one we'll see throughout eternity. We're going to see the Father in the face of Yeshua throughout eternity. This books are free on my website. Again, verse 28, and her prophets have dabbed them with untempered water, seeing vanity and divining lies unto them, saying, thus said Yahweh, when Yahweh had not spoken. The people of the land have used oppression and exercised robbery and have vexed the poor and the needy. Yea, they have oppressed the stranger wrongfully. As I mentioned in a couple of podcasts, I was going over to the Bahamas to minister, and I was talking to one of the ladies at where you check in before you go into the country. And she said she just went to a prophetess meeting. A prophetess from the United States was having a meeting, and she put $1,000 on her credit card to get on a healing line, $1,000 line, which is ridiculous. Yeshua said, whosoever will may come and drink of the waters of life freely. Incredible. I know that lady didn't have much money, but she did that just to get a blessing, quote unquote. Again, they vexed the poor and the needy. In verse 30, I sought for a man among them that should make up the hedge and stand in the gap before me for the land, that I should not destroy it, but I found none. Therefore I have poured out my indignation upon them. I have consumed them with the fire of my wrath. Their own way have I recompensed on their head, said Yahweh. Oh, when he moves in his wrath, get out of the way. Get out of the way. Make sure you're not caught up when he moves in his wrath. Examine the ministry that you're in. Are they teaching things that are based on the Word? Are you searching the Word out for yourself? Or is it some tradition, 1,700 years of tradition, that is not in the Word? Don't let that junk interfere with your relationship with Yeshua. For instance, Constantine and his crew tried to change the solemnity from the Sabbath to Sunday, a day to worship the sun. Every day of the week is after a pagan god. The Sabbath is real. Friday night, 6 p.m. to Saturday, 6 p.m. is the Sabbath. It's a great time to be in his presence. We have an appointment with him. Every one of those feast days are an appointment with our Father. So every Sabbath he wants to refresh us, tell us what we did right, tell us what we did wrong. You have to allocate some time between 6 p.m. Friday, 6 p.m. Saturday, and the beginning of the week is 6 p.m. Saturday. Yeshua said, I went to 12 hours in a day. The day runs from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. The night season, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. There's no other way of looking at the Word. Everything lines up. When he hung up there for us on the 9th hour of the day, that was 3 p.m. Noon is the 6th hour of the day. And actually the 7th hour is the hour I was talking about when he wants to heal the most. When his healing anointing is the greatest, at 1 p.m. It's the 7th hour of the day. When the centurion's servant was healed at the 7th hour of the day, 1 p.m. It's important. Those books are free. HenryWalker.org, under messages, the bottom of the message page. But I want to talk about a leader that was ordained by Yahweh and did such a great job, and that's Ezra. Go to the book of Ezra with me. See, just because you're comfortable in that large ministry doesn't make it right. There's an old story about you can put a frog in a pot of warm water on the stove and let it get hotter and hotter, get more and more comfortable, and then you boil it and it stays in there. It's dead. See, you really don't realize that you're involved in a ministry where the spirit of Antichrist is moving, not the Spirit of the Father. Because again, the Father backs up His Word with signs and wonders, not some of the junk that's being preached from the pulpit. And remember, again, the Sabbath is real. The Sabbath is real. The Sabbath is the fourth commandment written with the finger of the Father. The same finger that wrote to Belshazzar, Mene, Mene, Tekel, Upharsin. The same finger that wrote the sins of the people who wanted to stone the woman taken in adultery. Important. Isaiah 53 talks about Yeshua being the arm of Yahweh. The only body that the Father has is Yeshua. Yeshua is the temple of the Father. See, the Father overshadowed Mary and spoke the Word into her womb, and the Word became flesh. That's why it says in Acts chapter 20, verse 28, that the Father has purchased our salvation with His own blood. Yeshua had no earthly, His blood could not be traced back to any person on the earth. It was right back to the Father. So Yeshua is the Father manifest in the flesh. Again, Revelation 4:2, there's one sitting on the throne. Read that whole chapter. It talks about Him on the throne, Him on the throne. But the book of Ezra, we want to talk about Ezra because Ezra was a great leader. And more ministers have to look at his life and see what he did. And also Nehemiah. We won't have a chance to get into Nehemiah today, but on this podcast. In Ezra chapter 7, Ezra's right after 2 Chronicles. Ezra chapter 7, verse 10. For Ezra had prepared his heart to seek the Lord Yahweh, and to do it, and to teach in Israel statutes and judgment. As I mentioned, every minister should be seeking the Father. What do you want me to say to the people? Not what I want to say. I mentioned on the last podcast, you could have some man up there preaching. He had an argument with his wife, and now he's preaching against women in ministry. You can't be sure that that person up there preaching is really hearing from Yahweh or not. But that's what God study the word for yourself. In verse 11, there's one aspect of Ezra I want to talk about is his trust, how the king trusted him. In verse 11, this is the copy of the letter that King Artaxerxes gave unto Ezra the priest, the scribe, even a scribe of the words of the commandments of Yahweh and of his statutes to Israel. Artaxerxes, the king of kings, unto Ezra the priest, the scribe of the law of Yahweh, perfect peace, and in such a time, I make a decree that all they of the people of Israel and of his priests and the Levites in my realm, which are minded of their free will to go up to Jerusalem, to go with you, Ezra. For as much as thou art sent of the king and of his 7 counselors to inquire concerning Judah and Jerusalem, according to the law of your Elohim, which is in your hand, and to carry silver and gold, which the king and his counselors have freely offered unto the Elohim of Israel, whose habitation is in Jerusalem, and all the silver and gold that I can find in all the province of Babylon, with the freewill offering of the people and of the priests, offering willingly for the house of their Elohim, which is in Jerusalem, that thou mayest buy speedily with this money bullocks, rams, lambs, with their meat offerings and the drink offerings, and offer them upon the altar of the house of your Elohim, which is in Jerusalem. And whatsoever shall seem good to you and to your brethren, to do with the rest of the silver and gold, that do after the will of your father, Elohim. Look at the favor he had, and look how he trusted Ezra so much. Anybody who goes to assembly has to trust the minister. They have to trust that person. That person is hearing from the Father and wants to speak what he wants you to hear. But some of you are just sitting there comfortably, and you don't want to be shaken up. And that minister knows you don't want to be shaken up, and he is not going to shake you up, because he wants you to stay in there. He's interested in your tithes and offerings. We talked last podcast about they're in such a hurry to make somebody a member, because then they say, well, as a member, you're responsible to pay your tithes and offerings. But tithes and offerings should be free will. The word says that tithes and offerings should be brought to where Yahweh's name is mentioned. Yahweh, Yahshua. There's no other name for the Father but Yahweh. Yahweh is I am that I am. It's an action verb. 7,000 times in the Old Testament, instead of putting Yahweh, the King James people or the King James people, like I say, put Lord capitalized. L-O-R-D. And Lord comes from Baal. Baal's above the Lord of the flies. The devil tried to rob that from you, and it sounds so strange to so many of you. Yahweh. Especially Yahshua too. It's the Y-A-H, that's the family name. Y-A-H-W-E-H, Y-A-H-S-H-U-A. It said in the book of Isaiah that the name of this child shall be Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty Elohim, the Prince of Peace, the Everlasting Father. It says that this child, talking about Yeshua, his name shall be the Everlasting Father's name. It's the Yahweh. Yeshua is Yahweh in the body. Yah in the body. Yeshua means Yahweh our Savior. See, in Genesis chapter 1, Elohim is used. Elohim created and so forth. But in chapter 2, he uses Yahweh Elohim. Because Elohim by itself means that the Father has all this power and majesty. But it doesn't mean anything to us unless he puts Yahweh Elohim. That means not only do I have the power, I want to use it for my creation to benefit them. Yahweh is an action verb. I am that I am. Whatever you need him to be, he'll be there. When you surrender to the Father, when you turn your flesh over to the Father, so he can mortify the deeds of your flesh, Romans 8, verse 13, verse 29, make you more like Yeshua, and bring the fruit of the Spirit out of your life. In Galatians 5, verse 22 to 26. which is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. Then you can use his name, and it's an action verb. He instantly goes to work on your behalf because you surrender everything to him. And everything he has is at our disposal when he wants to give it to us. Every blessing he gives to us is predicated upon our spiritual relationship with him, our spiritual character. He's not going to give any blessing to any of us unless our spiritual character with him can withhold the blessings and not fall in love with the blessings more than him. Again, not falling in love with the blessings more than him, the blesser. It's just so very important. In chapter 8, talking about Ezra, verse 21, I proclaimed a fast there at the river of Ahava, that we might afflict ourselves before our Elohim to seek of him a right way for us and for our little ones and for all the substance. Here's a man of prayer. Here's a man of prayer. Your minister should be a person of prayer. In chapter 9, Ezra chapter 9, verse 1, now when these things were done, the princes came to me, saying, the people of Israel and the priests and the Levites have not separated themselves from the people of the lands, doing according to their abominations, even of the Canaanites and the Hittites, the Perizzites and Jebusites, the Ammonites and the Moabites and the Egyptians and the Amorites. The Israelites were not separating themselves from the abominations that these other groups of people were doing. In verse 2, for they have taken up their daughters for themselves and for their sons, so that the precious seed have mingled themselves with the people of those lands. Yea, the hand of the princesses and rulers have been chief in his trespass. And Ezra said, when I heard this thing, I rent my garment and my mantle and plucked off the hair of my head and on my beard and sat down astonished. Look how the sin, this trespass, had affected him so much. That's the kind of minister that you should be under. Somebody who pours sin, preaches against sin, and raises up the name of Yahweh. It helps to bring you to a closer relationship with the Father. And if you don't have that ministry, study under us for a while. We have 2 podcasts a week. Study, and you'll be able to recognize the minister that he's leading you to. You'll see some of the characteristics. Study under us for a while. It's very important. This ministry preaches line upon line, precept upon precept. Everything I preach is in the Word. And I want Yahweh to use me just the way he wants. If it's to encourage you, it's great. If it's to come against the sin in your life, that's great too, because he's working on me every day. And verse 4, then were assembled unto me every one that trembled at the words of Yahweh, because of the transgression of those that had been carried away, and I sat astonished until the evening sacrifice, which is 3 p.m. He was just upset at sin. But like I said before, some of the ministers that you're under, the people that give the most tithes and offerings, they could do anything. But the minister will treat them special because of their tithes and offerings. And in verse 5, and at the evening sacrifice, again 3 p.m., I rose up from my heaviness, and having rent my garment and my mantle, I fell upon my knees and spread out my hands unto Yahweh, my Elohim. I said, O my Elohim, I am ashamed to blush to lift up my face to thee, my Elohim, for our iniquities have increased over our head, and our trespasses grown up into the heavens. In verse 10, and now, O Elohim, what shall we say after this? We have forsaken your commandments. This is the kind of lead that you need in your life. Somebody who wants to report to the Father, please the Father, and do what the Father wants him to do. Which thou hast commanded by thy servants the prophets, saying, the land unto which you go to possess it is an unclean land, with the filthiness of the people of the lands, with their abominations which have filled it from one end to another with their uncleanness. It's so important that before anybody gets married, they pray about it and make sure you see the fruits of the Spirit in that person's life. Again, love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. Make sure the Father has ordained that marriage. Not every marriage has been ordained from the Father. I have a message on my website about divorce and remarriage. It's very important you read that. Powerful message. Will help you. It talks about in 1 Timothy that in the end times people will forbid you to get married. He's not talking about marriage in general. He's talking about after divorce, forbidding to get married. Again, read my message. A lot of it is just hocus pocus, junk that people teach. That message is based on the Word. And sometimes the Father has to bring one back to two so he can save the husband and the wife. Sometimes it has to be a split between one back to two to save their souls. In verse 12, now therefore give not your daughters unto their sons, neither take their daughters unto your sons, nor seek their peace or their wealth forever, that you may be strong. How many people have married somebody because there's money involved? The other person is wealthy. It may not last. That you may be strong, eat the good of the land, and leave it for inheritance to your children forever. Chapter 10, verse 1. Now when Ezra had prayed, and when he had confessed, weeping and casting himself down before the house of Elohim, there assembled unto him out of Israel a very great congregation of men and women and children, for the people wept very sore. And Shaniah the son of Jehiel, one of the sons of Elam, answered and said unto Ezra, we have trespassed against our Elohim, and have taken strange wives of the people of the land, yet now there is hope in Israel concerning this thing. Now therefore let us make a covenant with our Elohim, to put away all the wives, and such as born of them, according to the counsel of Yahweh, and of those that tremble at the commandment of Yahweh, and let it be done according to the Lord. In verse 10, and Ezra the priest stood up and said, you have transgressed and have taken strange wives to increase the trespass of Israel. Now therefore make confession unto Yahweh, and do his pleasure, and separate yourselves from the people of the land and from the strange wives. So again, sometimes Yahweh has to permit a divorce to save the people in the marriage. He has to bring one back to two. So read my message, Divorce and Remarriage. And so we'll talk about Ezra, and powerful leader, and we'll talk more about that next podcast. Also about Nehemiah. But I want to mention to you about our ministry. This is a pro-life ministry. We believe that life begins at conception. In 1 John chapter 2, verse 13, John said, little children, you have known the Father. How? In the womb. When we conceive, we're introduced to the Father. So the Father is the agent of conception. And so a man and woman become a father and a mother at the moment of conception, not when a baby comes out of the womb. It's very important. Abortion is murder. Abortion needs to be exposed. It's murder, not legally, but in the eyes of the Father, it's murder. And if you had an abortion, ask the Father to forgive you, repent, and go on. If you're in an assembly and they're not announcing this every service, that the spirit of abortion is murder, that spirit of death is there, it's floating around, and it could follow you at home. It's got to be exposed every particular service. Because somebody could be visiting for the first time and only time, and they need to hear that. It's very important. So life begins at conception. It's beautiful. I remember when Mary went to Elizabeth's house, Elizabeth said that, Mary, when you saluted me, the babe leaped for joy in my womb, not the tissue. And I have some facts here that after 18 days, the heart of the baby begins to beat. At 28 days, the baby has eyes, ears, and even a tongue. 42 days, the skeleton is formed, the brain coordinates movement of muscles and organs, reflex responses have begun, and also brain waves can be detected. At 44 to 45 days, 99% of the muscles are present, each with its own nerve supply. At 8 weeks, every organ is present. The heartbeat is steady. The liver is making blood cells. Kidneys begin to function. At 8.5 weeks, fingerprints are being engraved. It's so incredible that everybody has their own fingerprints. He's so great. At 4 months, the heart is pumping 25 quarts of blood a day. At 4.5 months, the baby can feel pain. So it's so important you realize that. Help somebody who's considering abortion. Spread this around. It's so very important that life begins at conception. There's a lot of money involved in abortion. Satan gets more power every time a baby is aborted. Stay in the gap with me for these innocent babies in the womb. And there are politicians that believe in abortion on demand. Don't ever vote for them because they're guilty of murder, and you will be too by helping them go into office. It's important. Separate yourself. Again, if you have a minister and this minister is not calling abortion a spirit of murder, get out of there. If that minister does not want to do that, get out of that assembly. Don't come back, because you don't want that spirit to be following you, come against your family. It's the spirit of death, spirit of abortion. It's just like a thief. If the light is shined on a thief, it's going to run away. When it's addressed from the pulpit that abortion is murder, it's the spirit of death, and it needs to be exposed. There's life in that womb. Baby is alive. It's a baby. It's not a tissue. It's so very important. We're going to go to the Father in prayer in just a moment. Remember, if you want to email me, you can email me at contact@henrywalker.org, contact@henrywalker.org. If you have any questions or any praise reports, you ever want to donate to this ministry or subscribe to this ministry, just go to podpoint.com, /Henry Walker. And top page, it has a subscribe button. You'll be notified every time there's a new message. There's a donate button where you can donate to our ministry. Everything is tax deductible. This is a 501c3 organization. We feed some people in the Bahamas every week, Nassau, the Bahamas. You want help in that part of our ministry or any other ministry course, just pray about it. And also on my website, I have a calendar page, a Hebrew calendar page on my website, a Hebrew calendar, henrywalker.org. And if you go into Hebrew calendar, and then on the top left it has Heap Count, that's the link. Go into that, and it has Create Calendar. And make sure that Show All Hebrew Dates is checked off, and then hit Create Calendar, and you're right in. Remember that the day runs from 6 p.m. to 6 p.m. For my book, Noon, it really talks about different days in a month when the Father moves the most. You'll be able to follow that in my calendar page, the Hebrew calendar. But let's go to Father in prayer right now. Put your hand on the computer or put your hand on your phone. We want to pray for those innocent babies. It's so important that you pray for them. The Father will protect them and bring them to a full birth. Remember, life begins at conception. If you don't know that you're saved, just say it to me. Say, Father, I believe that Yeshua died for me. Forgive me of all my sins. Help me not to sin again. I turn my flesh over to you so you can mortify the deeds of my flesh and make me more like Yeshua and bring the fruit of the Spirit out of my life. Love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. I surrender everything to you, Father. Come into my spirit. Fill me with your Spirit to overflowing so I can help other people. And thank you, Father, for bringing me into your family. Now, if you said that prayer, you're right for a miracle. Others out there who have surrendered to the Father, just believe for a miracle right now, where you need it the most. Father, these people need a miracle so much, Father. And you're the one they're looking to, and I'm looking to you that you can bless them, Father. I thank you and I praise you. Satan, you lose everybody out there right now. Go and not return in the name of Yeshua, by the blood of Yeshua. I command disease, leave the people right now in the name of Yeshua, by the blood of Yeshua, and don't return in the name of Yeshua, by the blood of Yeshua. Father, touch them right now, Father. Touch their eyes. If they're having any eye problems, seeing problems, vision problems, touch their ears, Father. If they're having any hearing problems, touch them, Father. Touch right now, Father. Touch them from the top of the heads to the soles of their feet. By your stripes they were healed, Father. Give them a new beginning, Father. Restore. This is a time of restoration in this first month, too. Restore people, Father, in the area they need to be restored, that you want to restore them, Father. Oh, touch them right now, Father. And I thank you, Father. Keep blessing this ministry, expanding this ministry. Help more and more people to listen to this podcast. And keep strengthening my wife and I to do your purpose, Father. Especially, Father, we pray for those little babies in the womb, Father. That you protect them, Father. That you bring them to a full birth. Let their fathers and mothers realize that they are fathers and mothers at the moment of conception, Father. Educate people, Father. Talk to people, Father. And I'm thanking you and praising you for all these answers to prayer, all these miracles, in the mighty name of Yeshua, by the blood of Yeshua. Please tell other people about this podcast. And remember to next time, this is Evangelist Henry Walker saying, greater is the Father in you, your daddy, than he is in the world.